Okay, welcome to this lecture for CPI 111. This time we're going to talk about parents in GameMaker, parent and child objects. We'll learn about how powerful the use of parent objects and then child objects are in GameMaker to save you tons of time when you're developing games, especially as your games become more complex. And in order to do that, we're going to create part of a game, a space shooter game. It's a sort of Asteroid style, sort of classic space scrolling shooter style. So we'll work on that as well. Before we get started on actually walking through the game that we're creating and showing how to use parent and child objects, I want to talk a little bit about how they're used in GameMaker. So we'll learn about parent and child objects in GameMaker. We'll build a not quite complete space shooter game as a way of learning about them. So let's talk a bit about parent objects in GameMaker. As I mentioned, they can save you a lot of time and effort. So when is it that you actually want to use parent objects and child objects when you're building your game? You want to use them if you're going to have multiple objects in a game that share a number of events and behaviors. Objects that have a lot of common settings or a lot of common actions in the way they react to other objects in the game. In those cases, making use of a parent and child or children makes a lot of sense, and we'll see what that looks like here in a couple of minutes. So how do these work exactly? Well, the idea is that you can set up a parent object with a given set of events and actions, and if you then create other objects and make those objects children of that parent, those children are going to inherit all of the events and actions that you give to the parent. Just like in real life, well, we don't inherit all of our actions and parents, but we inherit some from our parents. So let's talk a bit more about this idea of inheriting events from the parents. So a child object will inherit all of the events and the actions that go with those events from its parent. However, a child object can have its own events too. It can have different sets of events and actions, and it also can have the exact same events that the parent has. Now, if a child has the same event that the parent has, the way GameMaker will work is that the child will rule. So when a parent and child have the same event, but with different actions, the child will use its own actions that go with that event, and the parent will use the parent's actions. A little confusing in words, but we'll see what it looks like in just a moment when we get in and start building our game. A little bit more about actions. So if you're building a game and you have an action that refers to a parent object, that action and all of its behaviors will apply to all of the children of that parent. So for example, let's say you've got a collision event, and the collision event you say is going to happen with a parent object. That collision event will also work, all of the actions that go with that collision event will work if you also collide with any of the children of that parent. Again, confusing in words, but it will make a lot of sense when we see it here in just a few minutes. Conversely, if you have an action that refers to a child object, that event won't have any impact on the parent of that child. It's a one-way street. Let's talk more about this, specifically about collisions. So as I mentioned, if you have a collision event and the collision event is with the parent object, that collision will also work when you collide with any children of that parent. But if you have a collision with the child object, it doesn't have any impact on the parent of that child. And finally, parents can have parents. can have parents, can have parents, can have parents, can have parents, and so on. You can nest objects many layers deep. But you have to be cautious in doing so. You can't and shouldn't create parent sort of cycles. So for example, if I have a Brian object that's the parent of a Kohei object, it can't be set up so that Kohei is also then the parent of Brian. That would cause lots and lots of problems. Let's get into our actual game now and start to look at how these parent and child objects actually work inside GameMaker. We'll start off by showing you what our game is going to look like when we're done. This is not a complete game, as I mentioned. It's just a piece of a game, but it gives some great framework that you could use, since the files will be available up on the course Blackboard site when you're creating your own games, depending on the type of game you're going to do. So here's where we're going to end up. We're going to have a space shooter game where if I fire on an asteroid, it breaks up the asteroid into smaller asteroids, if I can actually hit it. There we go. And then if I hit one of the medium-sized asteroids, it breaks into 3 tiny asteroids, and if I hit those, then they just go away. You win a level by destroying all of the asteroids on that level. Meanwhile, if you're hit by an asteroid, let me get hit by one here, then you lose health on your ship. And if you go all the way down to 0 on your health, then you have to start over again. See if I can hit the final one. And when you've cleared all of the asteroids, then you move to the next level. All right, so this is where we're going. This is where we're going to end up. It's got some sort of neat features in here, like it's got a nice explosion effect and so on, and all of that is already set up for you in the file that we've got on the Blackboard site. Now you've seen what the game is going to look like. Now let's step back and take a look at where the game is at the moment. You should make sure to download the game file from the course Blackboard site. Look in the Lectures folder and look for the date of our class, and then check for the name of it, which is GameMaker Parents. So in this starting version, we have some of the elements already set up for you. You don't have to build the game from scratch. We've got our health bar, we've got our ship already working and moving. We, however, can collide with the asteroids and nothing happens. And if we fire on one of the asteroids, it's destroyed, but it doesn't create any smaller asteroids because we haven't set up the parent objects and child objects yet. That's where that's going to take place. So let's come back into our game and see what we've already got set up for you. We've got 3 different ship sprites. We're using number 3 for our game here. You can choose to use one of the other ones if you like. We've got an explosion sprite, lasers, and then our 3 asteroids that we're going to be using. In this game, you may have noticed that the background was sort of scrolling. We saw a field of stars moving down the screen. So in order to make that happen, we've got a pair of backgrounds. We've got one that's just sort of a dark space-looking background, and then we've got another one that is just a bunch of stars. We've got our objects so far, our ship, our laser beam, our first asteroid, and then a controller object to make and manage all of the actions and events that are going on in the game. And we've got our room. The only thing I want to point out about the room that's different from what we've done in previous assignments is that because we've got that scrolling background, the way it's set up right now is we've actually set up 2 background images. We've got background 0, which is just that dark background. And then we've got our background 1, which is the starry background. And the thing to notice is that for our background 1, we've set it to scroll, and you can do that here in this setting. Horizontally, it's not going to be moving, but vertically, it's going to be moving at 4 pixels per step in our game. And that's how you can make that happen. You can see you can have quite a number of background images, and the way this will work is that as you go up in background number, those backgrounds will appear in front of lower numbered background images. Alright, let's take a look at the objects that we already have in here, and we'll start adding on to them to make other things work the way they should. First, let's look at our ship object. Lots going on with the ship. I won't go into super detail, but we've got our ship set up so that it will show the appropriate sub-image of the ship. The ship sprite has 3 sub-images, and so we're setting up the right one. Got a step event that's helping our ship move down so that it can't go beyond the top of the screen, or move up if it goes down and tries to go below the bottom of the screen. We've got our keyboard events so that we can move our ship left, right, up, and down. We've got an outside room event that will let our ship go off the left or right hand side of the screen and show up on the other side. We've got a keyboard press event that will create an instance of our laser. And then now we've got release events, which we haven't used before. And without going into super detail, the way that these release keyboard events are being used is we want to have it so that if the player releases one of the direction buttons, keys on their keyboard, the image of our spaceship is going to change back to the sort of regular facing the top of the screen sub-image of our spaceship sprite. And we also want the ship to stop moving if the player releases any of the direction keys on the keyboard. And so that's what we're doing here. And I'll invite you to look through those events and actions on your own. Let's look next at our laser object. Here we've got a create event as well, where we're simply making sure that we have the correct sub-image of our laser sprite showing, which is going to be sub-image 0. Laser sprite is animated, and so when we create the laser, we're going to have the animation play at a very slow speed. And then we're going to start the laser moving up. Then we've got an alarm that I'm going to go into in just a second. We've got an alarm set, and what will happen is that when this alarm event is triggered, it will destroy the laser object from the screen. Then we've got a collision with our asteroid event. We just saw that in action a minute ago. If our laser collides with the asteroid, it's going to change its own image into the explosion image rather than the laser image. And then we're setting up which sub-image of our explosion sprite we want, and then we're saying that we want the explosion animation to just play repeatedly. And then we're going to also have we're going to stop moving. Remember, we had our laser beam was moving towards the top of the screen, but when we collide with an asteroid, we're going to show the explosion, and we want that explosion to occur without moving. Then we're going to set our alarm for 1 second, and after 1 second, we'll destroy the laser beam object. We set it for 1 second to have a little bit of time for that explosion animation to play, so the player will notice it playing. And then finally, we're going to destroy the asteroid object. We've got an outside room event. If the laser goes outside the room without hitting anything, it will be destroyed. And we have an animation end event. This is for our laser beam. If the laser beam doesn't hit anything and it's just moving toward the top of the screen, when that laser sprite animation reaches its end, we're going to then choose a specific sub-image of that laser animation, and then we want the animation to stop playing. So the idea is that the laser beam animation will play all the way through one time, and then when it reaches the last image, we're essentially going to freeze it on that image. So again, I'll invite you to look through all of this events and actions on your own. Then I'm going to skip here and go to the controller event. Our controller event is got a few things going on. It's used to set things up and then keep track of what's going on in the game. So we have a create event. We're setting the player's health to 100. We've got a step event, and we're going to check to see if there are no asteroids left on the screen. If we've shot all of the asteroids, then we're going to restart the game. In this case, we only have one level. And we're going to check the player's health. If it's smaller than 1, then we'll also restart the game. And we have a very simple draw event that just simply draws the health bar on the screen. We've done that before. Now let's look at our asteroid object and see how it's set up initially. We're going to work a lot with this. It's ultimately is going to be our parent object for those other asteroid objects, the medium-sized and the smaller asteroid object. We've got a create event and an outside room event. Our create event has got a start moving, move fixed action. It's going to randomly pick one of any of the directions to move, and it's also going to do a somewhat random speed. So base speed is going to be 2 pixels per step, but then we're going to add to that a random number between 0 and 4. And so it will be differing speed when it's created and start moving around the screen. And we have an outside room event with a wrap in both directions action to go with it, so that we'll be able to have our asteroids move off one part of the screen and then return on the opposite side of the screen. Let's create a couple more events with this. Well, before I do that, I'm going to create my other asteroid objects, and then we'll start setting them up. So right now, this is all we've got, just a couple of settings that cause our asteroid to move around the screen. Let's go ahead now and create our second asteroid. This is going to be our medium-size asteroid. I'll call this Objet _ asteroid _ 2. I'll select the sprite that goes with it. Now watch very carefully what I'm going to do here. I'm going to select the parent as our first asteroid object. Now what does that mean exactly? So far, what it means is if I've got absolutely no events set up so far on this second asteroid. But on the first asteroid, I've got a create event and I've got an outside room event. Now, you remember what I mentioned in the slides I showed at the beginning of this lecture. We want to use parent and child objects when we're going to have multiple objects that share some common events and actions. So here is an example of that. If we create our second asteroid as we just did and make its parent this first asteroid, that second asteroid is now the child of this first asteroid. And what will happen right now is, even though on the child object we haven't placed any events whatsoever, if we were to place one of those child asteroids out on our screen, it would already automatically start moving around and it would appear on the opposite side of the screen. So let me show you what this looks like. Come down to our room, and I'm going to grab one of these, grab a couple of these medium-sized asteroids, place them out on the screen. Now what should happen is that even though we've created no events directly on our asteroid 2, because it's a child of asteroid 1, lo and behold, they start moving around on the screen. And you'll note also, if I fire on those asteroids that we've just placed on there, they get destroyed, despite the fact that we haven't set up any collision event on that second asteroid object. It will work anyway, because if I go back to our laser object, you'll see that on the laser object there is a collision set up with the parent object. And because there's a collision set up with the parent object, that same collision event will work for all of the children of that parent. Okay, let's go back now into our second asteroid, and let's set up a couple of events. We don't need a create event. It's going to use the event from its parents. Instead, we're going to create a collision event with the ship. So if the second asteroid collides with the ship, what we want to have happen is we want that second asteroid to get destroyed. We want to take off some health from our player because he ran into an asteroid. And we want to create instances of the third asteroid, those little teeny tiny asteroids. So those are all actions that are going to take place going along with this event. Well, we don't actually have a third asteroid yet, so we can just do the actions for the health bar and for the destroying of the object now, and then we'll come back and we'll do the instance creation once we've created our third asteroid. So first I'm going to set the player's health. And I'll knock off, how much am I? Let's knock off 10. And we're going to destroy the instance. There we are. Okay. We'll come back to this in a minute, but first we need to set up our other asteroid. So let's come up and create another object. Call it obj underscore asteroid underscore 3. We'll choose our third asteroid sprite. And once again, for the parent, we're going to go all the way up and select our first asteroid as the parent. Now, if you think about what happens with this third asteroid, we can set up some events already for this third asteroid. Like the second asteroid, it's going to have a collision with the ship. And we're going to then set the health again. There are a lot of those little mini asteroids floating around, so we'll take off fewer points. I'll just make it a -5 health. And we're going to destroy the instance of the asteroid when it runs into the ship. While we're at it, we also know that this asteroid is going to need a collision event with a laser. So if the player fires a laser and it hits the asteroid, we need to have some event there too. So I'll add another event, another collision, and a collision with the laser. And what is it we want to have happen? Well, we're going to destroy the instance. All right, so that's it for our third asteroid. It will inherit the create event and the movement when it goes outside the room event from the parent. So now we can go back into our second asteroid and we can add some actions to our collision with the ship. So what are we going to create? Let's create a pair of instances of our third asteroid. Actually 3, right? We're going to create 3 of those. You can choose to create as many as you want, but I'll create 3. So I'm going to come down and do create instance. I'm going to place this up at the top of our action list. Remember, these actions are going to happen in the order that they're listed in the action window here. And if I place the create instance first in this list, it will help a little with an issue that we'll have in the game where if the player runs into our second asteroid, if you think about what happens, the player runs into the second asteroid, that second asteroid is then going to create 3 of the third asteroid, and if it does it really, really fast, the player is still going to be sitting there, and so what will happen is that they would then collide, potentially, with those third asteroids before the third asteroids have a chance to move away, and then the player will lose health really quickly. So by placing our create instance actions at the top of the list, they get created first, gives them just a split second to start moving away before we set the health and we destroy our our instance. Alright, so what am I going to create? We're going to create Asteroid 3. We'll just set the position to relative. And I can just do a couple things. I could copy and paste again, and now I've got 3 of those already created. Here on our second asteroid, we also need to have an event to collide with the laser. And I'll give you one guess what's going to happen when we have the second asteroid collide with the laser. We'll create those same 3 instances. So in fact, I can just copy all 3 of them, do an add event, collision with laser, come over here, and paste them all in. Okay, we're set up for the third one. Let's do a final check on our first asteroid and make sure that we've got everything set up correctly there. Well, you'll see on our first asteroid, we're going to have collisions too, right? We've got collisions with the second and third asteroid. So let's create those now. We'll create our collision with the ship object. And if you think about what will happen when an asteroid collides with the ship, we're going to create instances of the second asteroid positioned at 0, 0 relative to our first asteroid. And we're going to create 2 of those. Then we're going to set our health. And we're going to take off some points. Well, let's make it big points. I'll say 20. Make it sort of tough. So if the player ship collides with that big asteroid, it's going to get knocked off 20 health points right away. And then we'll destroy the instance. We also need to have a collision with the laser. And what are we going to do? We're going to create 2 instances of our second asteroid. So I can just do copy and paste to make that work. Okay, so we've got everything set up. Let's go back into our room, and I'm going to delete out the second asteroid objects that I've created in there. And we'll just leave our 3 original big asteroids that we put in there. Then let's test our game and see if everything is working as we want it to so far. Got our 3 asteroids flying around. If I collide with one, I lose health. Creates those 2 little medium-sized asteroids. If I get hit with one of those, I lose points. If I fire on one, I get a nice effect. And if I run into stuff, I get some points taken off. So it's working pretty much the way we want it to. I would, if it were a real game, I would probably play with the actions a bit. To my mind right now, it's too easy to lose points still when you collide with one of those big asteroids, because the other asteroids are being created in the same location. What happens is that if your ship is just sitting there, it's going to begin to lose more health just through the act of running into one of the asteroids. It's likely to lose a bunch of health. Just in conclusion, we have our parent asteroid, and it has a couple of settings that are going to be shared by all of its children. It's got a create event that causes it to move in a random direction at a somewhat random speed, and it has an outside room event. Both of these events don't explicitly exist on the children, but it are still working on the children. Meanwhile, though, our children have their own versions of the collision with the ship and the collision with the laser, and in that case, our children objects will ignore the parent events and use their own version of those events. So that gives a good indication of some of the ways you can save time. It's a pretty simple example, but as your games get more and more complex, these parent and child relationships become really valuable. So get in there and play around on your own, make your own version of this space game, and feel free to use this version in the building of your own space shooter game.